Hi everyone. For this video, I want to explore an argument, a concept, which by the way, if you're wondering, because I can notice it myself, that little white spot is is just a paint. It's basically last year I was doing some decorating, and this is kind of an old top. So yeah, uh, just in case you're wondering, that's all it is. It's been through the wash many times, so it won't come out. Yeah. So basically, and it's comfortable for the evening. So. Basically, I want to talk about the idea that if someone hasn't experienced something directly, they can't have a perspective or an opinion. Because this is something that sometimes you see people suggest if they have directly been involved in something. Um, and it's particularly with contentious issues like conflict. So, for example, tonight I came across a post, a guy, I assume he'd been a soldier. And as much as I have a lot of respect for people who've been through that, he made an argument which I simply don't agree with, which is if you haven't been to Afghanistan, you can't have an opinion. Well, it's a major story. The fall of Kabul is a major story. So the premise that only soldiers are allowed an opinion, or only people who have been there are allowed an opinion, is something I just don't agree with. What I would say is that a soldier or an Afghan civilian or a contractor or a journalist who has been to the country will have a perspective that is different from an observer, that is more unique, that is more not unique, more direct. But with that example, the fall of Kabul, it's a major news story, so of course people are going to have opinions on it. Um, I think we're always learning in this world, and when something is in the news, people are going to have opinions. That's just the way it is. Um, but to expand this argument a bit and to look at it, take a writer, for example. Let's say you have a writer who covers the French Revolution or the Haitian Revolution or World War Two. Do they need to be a Jacobin revolutionary or an aristocrat in order to write a story set in the French Revolution? Of course not, because the only way to do that would be to get a time machine. Do they need to have been a GI in order to have a story set in World War Two? Of course not. Look at it another way. Are only artists allowed to have an opinion on a painting? Of course not. Film critics. Are film critics the only people allowed to have an opinion on the quality of a film? So if a film critic says, I mean, I have a sort of opinion on that myself. I don't, surprise, surprise, Nathan Hazlett has an opinion. I don't think that just because a film critic says a film is great or bad, that makes it the absolute gold standard truth. Um, Film critics, they study the history of film. They if they're renowned, they tend to be good at forming their argument and putting forward an argument for a particular film. But ultimately, it is just an opinion. A bit like op-eds in a newspaper or a magazine. They tend to be experienced journalists who are given that pretty privileged position, privileged compared to staff journalists or new journalists like I will be, who kind of have to make their mark. So it's a good position to be in because they can just offer their opinion and get paid for it. That's a luxury, really. Um, but again, no matter how well they craft their argument, and it might be a very persuasive argument, ultimately it is just their opinion. They have to use facts because, if they make up things, they could be in legal trouble. But it is ultimately their perspective. Another example of this is travel. People who have been to a particular country, and I'm not talking about necessarily a dramatic example like Afghanistan, but any country and then they think they know everything about it because they've been there. Well, I mean, I've seen people who've been to Cuba, um, and they tend to be left leaning or even call themselves communists. And they say, "Oh, it's not what the media shows. There's great healthcare and low crime." Tends to be the sort of argument they make. What they don't say is the extremely restrictive, nature of the country in terms of press freedom, in terms of freedom of speech. Things are gradually changing in Cuba, but that's just one example. Another one is Iran. I recall seeing a young American guy, and he was traveling around Iran, and his whole pitch was, "Oh, it's not like what the media shows." That argument kind of annoys me because, of course, you're going to find friendly people. Of course, you're going to probably have hospitable treatment, and you'll find maybe beautiful scenery and a lot of positive things, and that's fine. It's fine to show that. What I don't accept is this argument that because you're showing the positive side, that is therefore the only truth. I've always found blaming the media a little bit of a cop out, to be honest, because it's a very easy thing to do. And the thing about something like that is, okay, you've met nice people. I'm sure many Iranians are very warm, hospitable people, but that doesn't change the human rights situation in the country. It doesn't mean that gay men aren't brutally persecuted. It doesn't mean that there isn't torture in Evin prison, etc. So it's a silly argument to make. Positive generalizations or positive sweeping statements can be just as ignorant as negative sweeping statements, actually. And they're not particularly progressive if they're sending out only one perspective of a situation. People have opinions, but people shouldn't make sweeping statements. And I guess we all do. I've probably done it at times. And, we should all, myself included, try to avoid doing it. But anyway, that's just something I want to put out there. Incidentally, the whole concept of cultural appropriation kind of taps into this, i.e., if you have a white Western person who takes an interest in, say, Eastern or African culture, then the ideas are culturally appropriate. Well, all I would say about that, and it's probably for its own video, is they should respect the culture, they should do their homework, and they shouldn't do it in a sort of flippant or mocking way. That's where I would agree with people getting annoyed. However, I don't agree with the premise that just because they're white or Western, they can't enjoy it. Um, I mean, why shouldn't an American or European woman wear a Chinese cheapao if she thinks it's elegant and comfortable, and fashionable, as long as she's not sort of saying, "Oh, I am Chinese" or something like that. So I really don't like this whole way that cultural appropriation is weaponized. It's ironic because, if anything, endorsing all our cultures is the whole epitome of being open-minded. So, if you had someone who's very inward looking and they only sort of looked at their own culture, then, they'd still be criticized. So honestly, some people I do think look for reasons to be offended. In the case of restaurants, say you had a white manager who wanted to specialize in Asian food, what he or she should do is have input from Asian experts, um, and respect that. So I can understand the thing about cultural appropriation if someone is kind of using a culture and they're misrepresenting it, or they are, not fulfilling its sincere sincere features, for want of a better term. But I don't agree with this idea that only only people who are associated with a culture should be allowed to enjoy it. Third, um, if you take that argument that's extreme, then only Japanese people should be allowed to participate in karate, and it's I forget the fighting form of it. Karate is actually the discipline as opposed to the actual martial art, which is something I only found out this year. But it's yeah, cultural appropriation. It's just one of those things that is used, in my opinion, by the woke left to try and control people, and it's pathetic. Let me know your thoughts. Basically, if I was to summarize this video, I think we should all be allowed to seek knowledge and to have opinions. Obviously, if someone is, claiming to be an expert or they're really pontificating, being really opinionated, and they're demonstrating ignorance about something, like they're really, really demonstrating ignorance, and someone who has directly experienced it knows that they're talking ignorance, that's fine to challenge that. Um, I mean, I come from Northern Ireland, and sometimes I see people from around the world opinionate on that, and they oversimplify what is a complex conflict. They'll say that, oh, the Brits should just get out. Well, that's ignorant because people like myself, we didn't. I've grown up in England, but people who come from that unionist background didn't just arrive in Northern Ireland yesterday. It's many many generations. So when outsiders opinionate on that, I think people just need to try and inform themselves about things. They can have opinions, but at least try and do a bit of research. And what I do in all my videos, if I opinionate, which I do, I try to give sources where possible, so a news source or something else, or I always put the disclaimer that it is just my opinion. But I do that specifically because I don't want people to say, "Oh, this guy claims to be an expert." I know I'm not an expert on these subjects, and I make a conscious effort not to suggest that I am. All I am is a guy offering my opinion on things. But I don't say that I know everything. I don't say that I'm always right. It's just my opinion. Let me know your thoughts and thanks for watching.